In 1944, American intelligence faced a terrifying question. What if Hitler was closer to an atomic bomb than anyone realized? All-eyed scientists working on the Manhattan Project feared the same thing. Germany had discovered nuclear fission first. Germany had world-class physicists. Germany had access to uranium. If Berlin detonated a nuclear weapon first, London could vanish overnight, or New York, or Moscow. No one knew how far the Nazis had progressed. So the United States created a secret mission with one purpose: find the scientists, find the uranium, and find out the truth before it was too late. That mission was called Operation Alsos, and it moved directly behind the front lines of war. The fear began with physics. In 1938, German scientists discovered nuclear fission, the process that made atomic weapons possible. The discovery shocked the scientific world. It also terrified it. Many of the greatest physicists in Europe had once worked in Germany. Some fled the Nazi regime. Others stayed. By 1942, the United States had launched the Manhattan Project, an enormous effort to build an atomic bomb before anyone else could. But there was a haunting uncertainty. Was Germany already ahead? American intelligence did not have clear answers. Reports were fragmented. Rumors suggested uranium stockpiles inside the Reich. There were whispers about secret laboratories in occupied Europe. And there were names. Physicists like Werner Heisenberg, brilliant, unpredictable, and still inside Germany. If Heisenberg and his team succeeded first, the war could change instantly. So, in 1943, the United States created a hybrid mission. It combined soldiers, scientists, and intelligence officers. The mission would move with advancing Allied forces across Europe. Whenever a city fell, they would enter immediately. They would seize laboratories, confiscate documents, interrogate scientists, and capture nuclear materials before they disappeared. This was not just espionage, it was a scientific manhunt. The operation was placed under the command of Colonel Boris Pash. He was not a physicist, he was counterintelligence, paranoid, relentless, and deeply suspicious of everyone, including scientists. At his side was Samuel Goudsmit, a Dutch-American physicist who understood the science behind the fear. Their partnership was unusual. One man trusted equations, the other trusted nothing. As Allied armies pushed into Italy and later into France, Alsos teams followed closely behind, sometimes only hours after combat ended. They entered bombed universities, ransacked laboratories, opened safes, collected uranium samples, and searched for one thing above all: proof. Proof that Germany either had or did not have the bomb. Every day without answers increased anxiety in Washington, because if the Nazis were closer than expected, time was running out, and the next explosion might not be conventional.
By late 1944, Allied forces were pushing deep into France. One city mattered more than most: Strasbourg. Before the war, it had been a center of advanced scientific research. Now it was under German control. Intelligence reports suggested that key nuclear documents might be stored inside its university laboratories. If Germany had made real progress toward a bomb, Strasbourg could reveal it. Alsos moved in immediately after the city fell. The fighting had barely stopped, smoke still hung over shattered rooftops. Inside the university buildings, laboratories were abandoned in haste. Papers were scattered, equipment left mid-experiment. It looked like someone had left quickly, but not chaotically. The Alsos team began collecting everything: research notes, blueprints, correspondence between German physicists. And then they found something critical: a collection of reports written by German nuclear scientists. Detailed, technical, honest. They weren't propaganda, they were internal assessments. And what they revealed stunned the Americans. Germany was nowhere near building an atomic bomb. The reactor experiments had stalled, uranium enrichment was primitive, resources were limited. The scientists themselves doubted feasibility within the war's time frame. It was the first solid proof that the Nazi atomic program was fragmented and underfunded. Samuel Godsmit reportedly felt both relief and disbelief. For years, Allied scientists had assumed Germany was ahead, but the documents suggested the opposite. The Nazi nuclear effort had never received the industrial scale that the Manhattan Project had. Hitler had invested more faith in rockets and conventional weapons. Atomic research had remained scattered and cautious. But the mission wasn't over. Proof on paper wasn't enough. The scientists themselves still had to be located, because knowledge is portable and desperate regimes can make desperate decisions. As Germany collapsed, there was a new fear. What if German nuclear scientists surrendered to the Soviets instead? The race had shifted. It was no longer just about Hitler. It was about the post-war balance of power. Alsace was ordered to move faster, capture the mines, secure the materials, and prevent the atomic future from slipping east. The war in Europe was nearing its end, but the race for knowledge had just begun. By early 1945, Germany was collapsing. Cities were falling, supply lines were breaking. But for Operation Alsos, the war had narrowed to one objective: find the scientists. One name stood above all others: Werner Heisenberg. He was one of the architects of quantum mechanics, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, brilliant, elusive, and still inside Germany. If anyone could have pushed the Nazi atomic program forward, it was him. As American forces crossed the Rhine in March 1945, Alsos teams followed closely behind. Their orders were clear: move fast, reach the scientists before the Soviets, secure all nuclear materials. Intelligence suggested Heisenberg had relocated to southern Germany, near the Alps, away from major cities, possibly attempting to disappear. Colonel Boris Pash treated the mission like a counterintelligence operation, not a scientific visit. Armed units accompanied the team. Vehicles moved under combat conditions. Roads were unstable. Snipers were still active. This wasn't a polite academic arrest. It was a battlefield extraction. In April 1945, Alsos teams reached the town of Haigerloch. There, hidden inside a cave beneath a church, they discovered something extraordinary: a small experimental nuclear reactor. Not a bomb, not even close, but proof of Germany's attempt to harness fission. The reactor was crude compared to American efforts. Its uranium cubes were suspended inside heavy water. The setup was experimental, improvised, fragile. It was not a weapon. It was a laboratory curiosity. The Americans dismantled it immediately. The uranium was confiscated, the heavy water secured. But Heisenberg wasn't there. He had already moved. The hunt continued south. Finally, on May 3, 1945, Werner Heisenberg was located by American forces in Bavaria. He did not resist. He was detained quietly. There were no dramatic speeches, no last declarations, just a tired physicist at the end of a collapsing regime. Other German scientists were captured as well: Otto Hahn, Kurt Diebner, Carl Friedrich von Weizsäcker. One by one, the minds behind Germany's atomic research were secured. They were transported to Allied custody. The immediate threat was over. Germany had not built the bomb. But the implications were far from finished. Because the atomic age was not ending, it was beginning. And now the United States possessed not only its own Manhattan Project, but also the knowledge of its former enemy. After their capture, the leading German nuclear scientists were not imprisoned like ordinary prisoners of war. They were transported to England. There, in a quiet country estate called Farm Hall, they were placed under surveillance. They were allowed to talk freely. What they didn't know was that every conversation was being secretly recorded. The Allies wanted to know one thing: had Germany truly failed to build the bomb, or were the scientists hiding knowledge? For weeks, the physicists discussed reactor designs, calculations, and theoretical possibilities. They speculated about Allied progress. Some believed the Americans were years away from a weapon. Others doubted the bomb was even technically feasible at scale.
Then, on August 6, 1945, the radio announcement came. An atomic bomb had been dropped on Hiroshima. The room fell silent. At first, disbelief, then confusion, then stunned calculation. Werner Heisenberg reportedly struggled to explain how the Americans had solved the engineering challenges so quickly. Some scientists were shocked that the United States had committed to using such a weapon. Others seemed more disturbed by one realization: they had been wrong. Germany had never come close. The Manhattan Project had operated at an industrial scale beyond anything the Reich attempted. While Germany experimented cautiously with small reactors, the United States had mobilized entire cities, billions of dollars, and tens of thousands of workers. The atomic race had not been close. It had been asymmetrical. Operation Alsos had confirmed what Washington needed to know months earlier. But now the world had changed permanently. The scientists at Farm Hall understood something else as well. Their capture had not only prevented their knowledge from falling into Soviet hands, it had ensured that the United States entered the atomic age with a monopoly. For a brief moment in history, one nation controlled the most destructive weapon ever created, and Operation Alsos had helped secure that advantage. The mission had begun with fear that Hitler might build the bomb first. It ended with certainty. Germany had failed. America had not. But the moral questions would linger far longer than the war, because once the atomic door was opened, it could never be closed again, and the race that followed would not be fought in Europe, but across the entire world.